Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. We are beginning our journey into The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. We're going to use the same format that we have used in order to commune with all kinds of books. We are going to first have multiple readings, two readings of paragraphs. You're going to go paragraph by paragraph, not paragraph, but section by section. And then I'm just going to invite people to comment, and we'll go from there. Today, aim is to cover the coming of the ship and the section on love, and we'll go from there. All right, excellent. Let's get started. We're going to, the first reader is going to be Maritza. Maritza, if you could share it on the screen.
How does that look? It's good?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right. Shall we get started?
Yes.
Al-Mustafa, the chosen and the beloved, who was a dawn unto his own day, had waited 12 years in the city of Orphalese for his ship that was to return and bear him back to the isle of his birth. And in the 12th year, on the 7th day of Ailol, the month of reaping, he climbed the hill without the city walls and looked seaward, and he beheld his ship coming with the mist. Then the gates of his heart were flung open, and his joy flew far over the sea, and he closed his eyes and prayed in the silences of his soul. But as he descended the hill, a sadness came upon him, and he thought in his heart, "How shall I go in peace and without sorrow? Nay, not without a wound in the spirit shall I leave this city. Long were the days of pain I have spent within its walls, and long were the nights of aloneness. Who can depart from his pain and his aloneness without regret? Too many fragments of the spirit have I scattered in these streets, and too many are the children of my longing that walk naked among these hills, and I cannot withdraw from them without a burden and an ache. It is not a garment I cast off this day, but a skin that I tear with my own hands. Nor is it a thought I leave behind me, but a heart made sweet with hunger and thirst. Yet I cannot tarry longer. The sea that calls all things unto her calls me, and I must embark. For to stay, though the hours burn in the night, is to freeze and crystallize and be bound in the mold. Fain would I take with me all that is here, but how shall I? A voice cannot carry the tongue and lips that gave it wings. Alone must it seek the ether, and alone and without his nest shall the eagle fly across the sun.
Thank you, Maritza. Let's have one more reading. Brent, would you be able to read? If you can read, go ahead.
Do you want me to start at this?
Yeah, right from the beginning again.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read a book here because my
Sure.
camera's in
That's
the way.
fine.
Okay.
Just a second. Maritza, could you again scroll all the way back and move the screen as Brent is reading? Thank you. Go ahead, Brent.
Al-Mustafa, the chosen and the beloved, who was a dawn unto his own day, had waited 12 years in the city of Orphalese for his ship that was to return and bear him back to the isle of his birth. And in the 12th year, on the 7th day of Elul, the month of reaping, he climbed the hill without the city walls and looked seaward, and he beheld his ship coming with the mist. Then the gates of his heart were flung open, and his joy flew far over the sea. And he closed his eyes and prayed in the silences of his soul. But as he descended the hill, a sadness came upon him, and he thought in his heart, how shall I go in peace and without sorrow? Nay, not without a wound in the spirit shall I leave this city. Long were the days of pain, and I have spent within its walls, and long were the nights of aloneness. And who can depart from his pain and his aloneness without regret? Too many fragments of the spirit have I scattered in these streets, and too many are the children of my longing that walk naked among these hills, and I cannot withdraw from them without a burden and an ache. It is not a garment I cast off this day, but a skin that I tear with my own hands. Nor is it a thought I leave behind me, but a heart made sweet with hunger and with thirst. Yet I cannot tarry longer. The sea that calls all things into her calls me, and I must embark. For to stay though the hours burn in the night, is to freeze and crystallize and be bound in a mold. Fain would I take with me all that is here, but how shall I? A voice cannot carry the tongue, and the lips that give it wings. Alone must it seek the ether, and alone and without his nest shall the eagle fly across the sun. Now when he reached the foot of the hill, he turned again toward the sea.
That was the end.
That's the end.
Thank you. All right, folks. Now would love to hear your comments. Maritza, if you want to get us started, you're welcome to do that. You can stop sharing the screen. And let's go ahead and type an exclamation mark, folks, if you would like to comment on this part. Go ahead, Maritza.
So this in this section, it's fascinating to me, the idea, he's, as soon as he's happy, he takes back his being happy. The most fascinating metaphor to me is the one of the children of my longing and the fragments of the spirit. Like, children of my longing to me is like, it concretizes for you an image of longing that makes it far greater than what you would have thought it to be, just thinking, oh, longing is a lot, it's long. But to say the children of longing, it makes it exponential, right? Because that's how we as humans multiply. We multiply with children. And so this, to me, to use that to provide an imagery, like the metaphor of saying vast amounts of longing by using it as, these are the children of longing, I just thought was just like very impactful. That was one of the main ones here to me. In the overarching, this first piece, the beautiful overarching is that it starts, I want to point to you that when they identify the date of which his ship comes, they do call it the month of reaping. And that's going to come back as we go along in this reading. For other, because we're focusing here on different metaphors. And another one that I saw in this small piece was the idea of how he uses, he says, a voice cannot carry the tongue and lips that give it wings. And it's a beautiful imagery to show you that you can't hold on to something once it's been put out into the world, as it were, or the impossibility of holding on when you're trying to let go. And to me, those are like very ephemeral concepts. Like there's no real image for letting go. But Gibran does a beautiful way here of providing us with an image, a metaphorical image that now solidifies that vision for you, in a way that, when he then goes on to say, alone must it seek the ether, it it has a greater impact than if he would have just said, you can't hold on while letting go, because how does one see holding on, or how does one see letting go? And that's the beauty of, like, if we were looking at a metaphor, is that that's what it does for us. It solidifies it from this like vague ephemeral thing. It brings it to, the realm of the possible, as it were. And so we can envision our lips, and we can envision the craziness of when you speak something, your lips going off with what you just said, right? That imagery, we can visualize that. And in so doing, we already come of our own to the conclusion that it's an impossibility. So he doesn't have to say that literally. He leaves us with that impression far more clearly than if he had literally stated it. So I just was going to start with those few things, because I'm sure many others have a lot else to say.
Wonderful. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Love to hear anything that really strikes you about these passages. Next up is going to be Dave, followed by Joe. Give me just a second. I want to make sure. Go ahead, Dave.
There we go. Yep. I thought the whole idea of going to sea is a metaphor for him dying or death. And, the idea of ether is kind of like a spirit, the ether world, the spiritual world. And in fact, the word reaping, the Grim Reaper, also ties in. It's another metaphor for dying. And I thought the point he was making about not being made out of crystal, meaning that he's alive. If a crystal doesn't die, but it's not alive. And so I think the fact that he mentioned the fact he's not crystallized, meaning he's alive. He has all these experiences. He is what he is, but he's dynamic. He's part of the ever-changing universe. He's not some sort of a piece of quartz that doesn't change. So that's what I got out of this section. Again, the first part that we read, which I talked about last time we met over this, was I found it, I don't understand it when he says loneliness. And what was the other thing he said? I was alone and in pain. How can you not regret leaving pain and leaving loneliness? I don't get that part. That caught me.
Sure. We'll come to that at some point. I'll ask you to read it so we can have. So let me first talk about.
That's part of this here, Shrikant. We just read it.
Okay. So I want to comment on one thing, and then we can. Anybody who wants can comment on anything. So there is an equivalence of this and the New Testament here, because he's going back to the place of his birth. He's been looking forward to it for all this time. So it's not death in the normal sense where it's the end. For him, it's the beginning. It's a new beginning that he's looking forward to. So yes, it is a death in the sense that he is leaving something that he really likes. Yet he is going where he needs to go. So it is kind of combination of death and resurrection in one. It is he's beginning a new life. And there is that, he's been waiting for it for 12 years and his ship has finally come in. And I love, then the gates of his heart were flung open and his joy flew far over the sea. And he closed his eyes and prayed in the silences of his soul. All right, let's go to the next one. Is going to be Joe. Folks, you can make your own observations. You can pick up on anything anybody has said, anything, any combination of it. Just focus on things that speak to you, whether it is directly from the text or whether something that somebody else has said. But most of all would love to hear your own take, your own angle, your own way of approaching this text. Joe, you're next, followed by Penny.
Yeah, so I actually had a similar reaction to what Dave had. Was long were the days of pain I have spent within its walls, and the long were the nights of aloneness, and who can depart from his pain and his aloneness without regret? And I think that that's an important passage. He writes about pain later on in the in the poem, or in the document. I'll just say that. But what he also writes about pain is that pain allows us to help us with our joy, and in the sense that we appreciate things. That's the way I'm taking it. Once you experience pain, once you experience aloneness, and then you walk away without regret, because your joy is actually, you're starting your heart flung open. It's kind of, you're starting to breathe anew, walk into a new life. And there's this relationship. If things are always good, then that's not necessarily, you're not going to appreciate the things around you just as much. That's an important thing in life. Sometimes people wish they didn't have adversity. And what it does is adversity also allows you to appreciate the things that you do have. So I really found that to be a beautiful passage. And the way he captures the idea of pain and this interconnectedness, how it's related to joy. I find it to be profound on a number of levels. It's also a form of overcoming as well. So I think that there are so many, that's actually was my main takeaway from this opening passage.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And I think the last paragraph actually integrates those two. Just like the death is connected with the longing of the new life, this pain. See, what happens is that in this modern times, we just look at positive emotion or negative emotion. But this is an integrated way of being focused on the whole. And this pain and the joy is all integrated. And he actually shows you the integration. So the very next paragraph, he says, too many fragments of the spirit have I scattered in these streets, and too many are the children of my longing that walk naked among these hills, and I cannot withdraw from them without a burden and an ache. So he loves these people. He has given himself to these people. He has taken on their struggles, his own struggles in that place. And all that pain and aloneness of people not understanding him and being able to deal is part of who he is. To walk away from that is to say goodbye to a part of yourself that has made you who you are. So the pain here is not this unmitigated disaster, but it is a concomitant of his growth, his own growth, and the growth of everybody whom he has helped through this entire process. And that is something that he's talking about when he's talking about the pain. Go ahead, Joe.
I just have to say that this is directly analogous to what we just talked about last night with the idea of rebirth. I mean, it is one-to-one in the sense that, what are you being reborn from? What is changed in your heart? And what does that mean in a practical sense? It means your character has changed, and that you're actually able to enjoy things. You're able to, you have a new, you're a more kind because you can be more empathetic. You've actually gone through things. And that's what being reborn. And we were talking about, as we were talking about last night, what does it mean to be reborn? You know, to have the living water and to kind of, you know, to let the water flow through you to everyone else. And it's through what? The Spirit, which he also refers to. So I think that that's actually a really powerful way of actually describing it. And so it's kind of a rebirth that he's seeing. So anyway.
Wonderful. Maritza, did you have a comment on this before we go to Penny?
I did, yeah. Oh, no. Let Penny go first. I'll go after her.
Okay. Folks would love to hear from, hear any observations on anything that everybody has. Go ahead and just type an exclamation mark to line up to make the comments. Next up is going to be Penny.
Okay. Well, I also, there were a couple of verses which have been talked about before that really jumped to my attention. And one was the one about the days of pain. Long were the days of pain I have spent within its walls, and long were the nights of aloneness. And who can depart from his pain and his aloneness without regret? Which on the face of it seems like a great contradiction, because you'd think everybody would be really happy and pleased to depart from things that were unpleasant. But then I was thinking, later on, I mean, too, when he was talking about it, it's kind of a continuum he was saying, like joy and pain. It's not like they're totally separate. They are linked. And so the fact that he has had these experiences and the pain and the sorrow then is going to let him experience not a totally different thing, but kind of like the other side of it, that he can be joyful. But at the same time, as Maritza had pointed out, at first he was like, oh, yay, the ship is here. I am so happy. I couldn't wait to get out of this place. And then as soon as he thought that, he was like, well, wait a minute. And there was another verse that nobody has mentioned, but I also think it's good. It is not a garment I cast off this day, but a skin that I tear with my own hands. So he's saying all at once, I mean, this is just not like something that's totally outside me. This is a part of me, and I'm ripping off my skin, I mean, what an image, how painful. But the image of ripping off his skin, because it, this part of his life, I mean, it is him. And to leave it is really to leave part of himself someplace else. And so I just thought those were, things that were worth commenting on.
Wonderful. I'll just say one thing. The most beautiful thing about this is that it's clear that he needs to go. He knows it, and everybody also knows it. And everybody is joyous about it. That's one thing. At the same time, you see this gentle way and really deep way in which he loves these people. And they love him. And they are saying goodbye in the right way. They say, okay, what? He needs to go. And he's saying, I need to go. And then they're saying, so what is the right way of saying goodbye? And he's also thinking, what is the right way of saying goodbye? And this entire dialogue is questions and answers. So what they are hoping, and again, what they're hoping is that they will learn something from his wisdom. And then that will become an integral part of them. This is a farewell discourse. This is like he has done everything up to chapter 12 in Gospel of John. He has actually lived with the people, done things. And now is the time to say goodbye. And he's trying to say goodbye in the same way, where it leaves people with something that makes their life richer. Thank you. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark to comment on any aspect of these passages. Next up is going to be Marisa.
So since we're talking about that one passage, you know, it made perfect sense to me. Like I didn't find any contradiction in this passage. You know, who can depart from his pain and his loneliness without regret? Because it's the idea of, you know, you're leaving pieces of yourself behind. And I think that's the poignancy that is alluded to there. And I love that Penny brought up that line about the skin that I tear with my own hands, because it really does paint a picture of the difficulty he's experiencing. And, you know, if we remember, this is the very beginning. So while this entire book is a farewell discourse, right now we are part of the inner workings of his mind and his mental state prior. Like this is as he's realizing that he must embark upon a farewell discourse. Like it's one of those things of, it's the idea of parting is such sweet sorrow. You know, how no matter how exuberant you're feeling about the next chapter in your life, there's an ache, a tender longing for the death of the current life. It's like, you know, if you have lived in your apartment for 10 years and you have purchased this beautiful house in a beautiful area. Now you're excited because you're going to somewhere better, very excited, but there's still this, you're feeling very nostalgic because you've been in this house, this apartment for so long that, you know, it's like you can look through the walls and you're like, oh, there's that dent when, you know, so-and-so bumped into it, or, you know, I broke something here, or, you know, all the things that make it part of the fabric of your history is what you're leaving behind. And that's what he's alluding to us here. It's his joy is tempered with the acknowledgement that it's like, you know, the yin and the yang. You can't have one without the other. And so he's feeling that. And I love the abruptness with which it's done. Like he's feeling euphoric, and then he's like, oh, wait a minute. And it's just that. It's like, you know, you close on the house, you sign the deal, and you're like stratosphere, you know, you're calling your parents, you're so excited. And then when you come back home after celebrating, you're like, you look around the apartment, you're like, oh, this is going to be my last month here. And you know, you feel it changes a little. And I think that's, it's a beautiful reminder to us of what I think, I don't remember who said it. I think it was Joe who said that, you know, you can't have one without the other. It's almost impossible to feel such exultant joy without not acknowledging that there exists. And the reason for that is something we see a lot in many of the other works that we've looked at together. It's this idea of symmetry and, you know, consequences and of balance. You know, for your euphoria, every time you experience euphoria, you're going to ultimately have the pendulum swing back, and you will find a matching sentiment that is opposing. And it should not diminish the high, but it allows you to maybe put it in perspective. And so that's what I saw there, and just wanted to share that. Thank you.
All right. If anybody wants to comment on this section, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. And as we go ahead, you can talk about anything that we have, you know, anything that we have covered. So let's go to the next section. If you could, Marisa, if you could put it up on the screen, we're going to have, let's see, Nalini and then Jade read the same thing. So we'll have Nalini read first. Nalini, go ahead. Okay.
Thank you. Do I start now when he reads
Yes.
the door?
Yes.
Okay, I am just looking at mine.
Sure. It starts with now when he reached the
Yes. Thank you. Now, when he reached the foot of the hill, he turned again towards the sea, and he saw his ship approaching the harbor, and upon her prow the mariners, the men of his own land. And his soul cried out to them, and he said, Sons of my ancient mother, you riders of the tides, how often have you sailed in my dreams? And now you come in my awakening, which is my deeper dream. Ready am I to go, and my eagerness with sails full set awaits the wind. Only another breath will I breathe in the still air. Only another loving look cast backward. And then I shall stand among you, a seafarer among seafarers. And you, vast sea, sleepless mother, who alone are peace and freedom to the river and the stream. Only another winding hill will stream make, only another murmur in this glade. And then shall I come to you, a boundless drop to a boundless ocean. As he walked, he saw from afar men and women leaving their fields and their vineyards and hastening towards the city gates. And he heard their voices calling his name and shouting from field to field, telling one another of the coming of a ship. And he said to himself, shall the day of parting be the day of gathering? And shall it be said that my eve was in truth my dawn? And what shall I give unto him who has left his plow in the mid-furrow? Or to him who has stopped the wheel of his pipes? Shall my heart become a tree heavy laden with fruit that may gather and give unto them? And shall my desires flow like a fountain that I may fill their cups? Am I the harp that the hand of the mighty may touch me, or a flute that his breath may pass through me? I, seeker of silence, am I? And what treasure have I found in silence that I may dispense with confidence? If this is my day of harvest, in what fields have I sowed the seed, and in what unremembered seasons? If this indeed be the hour in which I lift up my lantern, it is not my flame that shall burn therein. Empty and dark shall I raise my lantern, and the guardian of the night shall fill it with oil, and he shall light it too. These things he said in words, but much in his heart remained unsaid, for he himself could not speak his deeper secret. And when he entered into the city, all the people came to meet him, and they were crying out of him as with one voice. And the elders of the city stood forth and said,
Let us do one thing. Let us
Okay.
stop up to the point where, he has not yet met other people. So
Okay.
we'll do one more reading up to this point, and then we will have one more section after
Okay.
that. Thank you. Thank you, Nalini.
Thank
Next up
you.
is going to be Jade. Jade, if Marisa is going to move the text up again, and if you could read from there.
No problem. All right. Now when he reached the foot of the hill, he turned again towards the sea, and he saw his ship approaching the harbor, and upon the prow the mariners, the men of his own land. And his soul cried out to them, and he said, Sons of my ancient mother, you riders of the tides, how often have you sailed in my dreams? And now you come in my awakening. Sorry, I lost my place. And now you come in my awakening, which is my deeper dream. Ready am I to go, and my eagerness with sails full sets set awaits the wind. Only another breath will I breathe. In the still air, only another loving look cast backwards. And then I shall stand among you, a seafarer among seafarers. And you, vast sea, sleepless mother, who alone are peace and freedom to the river and the stream. Only another winding will the stream make. Only another murmur in this glade. And then shall I come to you, a boundless drop to a boundless ocean. And as he walked, he saw from afar men and women leaving their fields and their vineyards and hastening towards the city gates. And he heard their voices calling his name and shouting from field to field, telling one another of the coming of his ship. And he said to himself, shall the day of parting be the day of gathering? And shall it be said that my eve was in truth my dawn? And shall I give unto him who has left his plow in mid-furrow, or to him who has stopped the wheel of his winepress? Shall my heart become a tree heavy laden with fruit that I may gather and give unto them? And shall my desires flow like a fountain that I may fill their cups? Am I a harp that the hand of the mighty may touch me, or a flute that his breath may pass through me? A seeker of silences am I? And what treasure have I found in silences that I may dispense with confidence? If this is my day of harvest, in what fields have I sowed the seed, and in what unremembered seasons? If indeed be the hour in which I lift up my lantern, it is not my flame that shall burn therein. Empty and dark shall I raise my lantern, and the guardian of the night shall fill it with oil, and he shall light it also. These things he said in words, but much in his heart remained unsaid, for he himself could not speak his deeper secret.
Thank you. Thank you, Jade, and thank you, Nalini. Let us now hear anybody who wants to comment on any of this. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom, whatever you prefer. We're going to start with Makeda. Makeda, go ahead.
Well, I think in some ways he feels that he's not finished, and that's what these back and forth questions and answers are for. He's saying if this is the time of his harvest, what seeds has he left? And when he talked about his longings earlier, I felt that had to do with his dreams and his dreams for these people who he's leaving. He's very invested in their lives and their struggles. And so even though he knows he needs to go, there's something, again, unfinished. And when we were talking about the pain and why he would regret pain as well as joy, he wasn't walking through the world like a monotonous robot. The feelings that he was experiencing were really symbolic of his life, of being alive, because life comes with all of these types of feelings. And so, of course, like Maritza was saying earlier, Penny, it's hard to leave life behind and all of your memories and struggles and pieces of who you are.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Makeda. Next up is going to be Joe. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom in order to comment on any part of these passages. Joe.
I just like the idea of the day of parting and the day of gathering, that it was kind of this coming together that I think there's a realization of the people that stopped working to come and actually see him as his time off. And then this is where it's kind of setting up, you get the whole feeling that it's setting up where he can share all the things that he's learned over this period. And so I think it's just a perfect setup for what we're about to get into, and in the different areas of love and pain, whatever it may be. But I think that it's a beautiful setup, because it's the imagery itself is, he sees his brothers, coming from his mother, from his mother's land. I forget the exact wording, and he's excited, and then everybody else is like kind of gathering. It's interesting. Anyway, I like it.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Dave.
Again, as I read his words, in my mind, I keep thinking of he's passing on to the other world. And so, like a drop going to the sea, he's reuniting with the all that is in a more spiritual realm, as opposed, where the lantern, he's saying goodbye to life, which is just what I think Mercada was mentioning, pain, being human. He's leaving the human world to go on to, in my view anyway, to go on to the other world, the sea, whoever has the lantern that's going to, his lantern is going dark here, and the God or whatever in the other world is going to then be the one to light his lantern as he returns to the mother, to the sea. He's only one drop. That's how I see it anyway. When I'm reading this, it just seems so, to me, it seems very definite that he's wants to leave something behind, some words. He's planted some seeds and all the rest, and he's wondering, what seeds have I planted? There are so many memories that I don't remember of what I did when I was here, and now I'm moving on. To me, it just seems like the whole transition from being alive, human, to wherever it is he's heading.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, David. When Gary commented on our, we're studying the farewell discourse, which is chapters 13 through 17 in Gospel of John. And one of the presentations he did was the tradition of farewell discourses across cultures, across literature. And he was describing common patterns that are there throughout. And this has all those characteristics because, he knows he's going, he loves these people, he wants to leave behind what he can, and he's going to do his best to do that. The people love him too, and are sad to have him go, at the same time know that he needs to go. And they too are saying, what will I get from him? What can I take from him that will last me my lifetime, that I can pass it on to my children, and children will pass it on to their children's children. So thank you. Next up is going to be Maritza, Penny, and Connie. Maritza.
I can totally see this as definitely as a, somebody who's passing on and what they're trying to leave behind. For me, what I actually saw in it first, and still continue to see, even though I do see the other perspective, I saw this as, the call of the ancestors. So in my mind, I envision this is what my ancestors may have very carefully pondered when they were leaving something for me. And I guess it's the same, maybe another side of the same coin. Yes, because if you're an ancestor, you probably had to pass on to become an ancestor. So there's no contradiction there. But the idea of, shall my heart become a tree heavy laden with fruit, that I may gather and give unto them. That just to me speaks of something I imagine that our ancestors do for us, even when they're not thinking about it. It's, we pluck things from our past and from the past of our community, and we use those things to create our present and our future. And so I read that line as just a musing of what are those things that I can't even imagine that I'm going to be leaving behind as legacy for my future, community, future people. So that's kind of the way I looked at it. I loved so we were told that it was the day of the reaping was the day he saw his ship. And now here he's talking about, if this is my day of harvest, in what fields have I sowed the seed, and in what unremembered seasons? And this seems to me to be a very soft kind of message to us, because everything he's saying is message, right? So this is a soft reminder that even those actions taken that are unremembered will bear fruit in the future. So that's kind of a very soft way of saying, tread lightly as you proceed along your forward moving path, because you don't know what you might be kicking and if it will derail you from the proper path, or if it will cause undue hardship to someone and you don't even remember doing it. So I saw that in that little admonition there. And also for me, the speaking of ancestors was seen to me in the idea of when he says, if this indeed be the hour in which I lift up my lantern, it is not my flame that shall burn therein. It's that passing of the torch. Again, as we go from generation to generation, we pass on our flame or bits of us to the next. And so, he goes a little bit more to say that about, the guardian of the night. And, but the guardian of the night, to me, I could see that as being maybe in one of the metaphors of some of the other stories. There's often a guardian between veils, between worlds. And so I thought it was interesting that he alluded to that as well. So I could see both. And it's interesting because for me now, I'm like, well, obviously we must be talking death. But I just wanted to share with you that for me, primarily, it brought up thoughts of my ancestors speaking. But now I guess there's no contradiction, at least to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up this point about ancestors, because the feeling of family permeates through this entire discourse. It is as a grandfather would talk to his children and his grandchildren. That love, that kind of familial bond is there with him for that entire people. So it's the expanded concept of family. The other thing I love here is these pairings. Shall the day of parting be the day of gathering? So this is a separation and gathering at the same time. And shall it be said that my eve was in truth my dawn? So is this the end, or is this the beginning, or is it both at the same time? Also, he's looking at kind of material and spiritual. What shall I give unto him who has left his plow in the mid furrow, or to him who has stopped the wheel of his wine press? So they have stopped their material activities, and now he's saying, what shall I give? So I love these two things playing against one another. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is going to be Penny, Connie, and Jade. Penny.
Okay, well, kind of linked to what everybody's been saying, though, that when he first sees, the ship, and he's thinking about it, and he sees this sailors who are his people, and then he said, and his soul cried out to them, and he said, sons of my ancient mother, you riders of the tide, so often have you sailed in my dreams, and now you come in my awakening, which is my deeper dream. So I thought that was interesting, the connection, between kind of, if you want to say, the material world and the spiritual world, if you want to think of your dreams as part of that, they're connected, that even his life is part of the bigger dream. And that when he sees those people, the spirit goes out because he feels a connection with the people that were, his people. And then I felt like, what you had just read too, when I read, shall the day of parting be the day of gathering? And shall it be said that my eve was in truth my dawn? I felt like there was almost like a surprise there, that he had felt that he was kind of alone, separate, although he was watching the people in the town. But all at once, then he realized that that really wasn't true, that he just thought, I think, well, I'm going to go get on the boat and leave or something. It seemed in my mind kind of like he was thinking maybe that would happen. But then he realized that actually, that this wasn't just the end, it was also a beginning of something. And that the people were coming and, wanting to commune with him a last time, and all joined together in the things that they had learned kind of from him, and to learn more. And I just thought that was interesting, that I felt that there was a little bit of a surprise in him, even though he had been trying, I think, to kind of bestow his teachings to them. He felt that nothing they hadn't really heard, but when he saw that they were all coming, he realized then that they had heard. And like Maritza said, he's not sure when he planted the seed or what he had done that made them feel this link with him, but it was clear there was a link and they were all coming.
Wonderful. I want to pick up on one point that you made. Jacob Branowski says that man is a social solitary. So man is social in a very deep way, and he's solitary in a very deep way. And he's both. For example, this man, he would disappear. He would go and sit on these hills and look at people. He would be away from them for a long period of time. And then he would come to them. This pattern is actually very common amongst poets and prophets. They have to gather up their experience. They have to process it themselves. They are gathering from the world, and eventually they are going to give to the world. But there is a time where they need the solitude to commune with the Tao in their own way. And only when that has happened, they think that they have something to give. So thank you. Thank you so much, Penny. Next up is Connie, followed by Jade. Connie.
Yes, I'm actually the 3 paragraphs after what Penny just said is what particularly touched me. Ready am I to go, and my eagerness with sails full set awaits the wind. Only another breath will I breathe in this still air, only another loving look cast back, and I shall be among you. To me, that brings such peace, serenity, acceptance, and letting go, and awe of being in such a place in your mind that you're ready to move on to the next chapter. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie. Next up is Jade.
I think my comment is more a remark in response to Maritza. The part about the fruit and her take on it kind of had me thinking of the biblical references of being fruitful and multiplying. And then the current stuff that everyone's talking about all the time about generational wealth, like putting the two together. It's just that we're supposed to be productive. And the people who come after us, they kind of benefit from our productivity as if it's fruitful. If not, then because the thing is, if you have fruit, whether you eat it or whatever it is, even if it passes through the body, I'll spare you the more imagery, but even then it can still multiply when it comes out. So you know, it's one of those things where even if you're fruitful but you don't do anything with that fruit, it falls on the ground and some of it will, you know, again multiply. So that's all I got, but that's what came to mind.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jade. All right, anybody else has any comments? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Otherwise, we'll go for the next level of reading. Folks, this is a conversation, so please go ahead and express your thoughts. Next up is going to be Makeda.
I like that you mentioned polymathy and that you mentioned Renaissance humanism, because this really is a discussion about what it means to be human in many different ways. And polymathy is the study of many things. So he starts with love, and then he goes on to talk about marriage, children, and then there, I think, 7 or 8 other chapters after that. So this is really an examination of what it means to be human from all different angles. And then you talked about macro comprehensiveness and micro incisiveness. And so we're looking at the bigger picture. And then on the other hand, all of the small details that it means, all the nuances of being human, all the different aspects of being human. So that gets to the micro incisive and the pain. Even incisive means something that's penetrating, something that's sharp, cutting. So I just see layers of all of that in the descriptions that you left in the meetup.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Makeda. I want to just build on one thing here, 2 things actually. One is the issue of polymathy. It's actually, isn't it incredible the range of questions that are asked? You know, he's talking about love and then talking about houses. And so, and he doesn't miss a beat. He considers all of them to be questions of dignity, because all of them are about being human. I really like your observation that this is really about being human. The points, secondly, about the macro comprehensive and micro incisive is that he's clearly, you know, communing with the Tao. He's communing, he's the ocean, he's the drop in the ocean. He's letting the wind flow through him like a flute to produce the music. So he's very much macro, but he is micro incisive. What he has to say when he starts to talk about houses is very deep and very pertinent to houses. So he has both those things going. Thank you so much. All right, shall we go to the next reading? How about Penny and Evanique for this one? Anybody else wants to read? Go ahead and type R in the chat, and we'll cycle around. I want to give as many people chance to read as possible. So we will go from here now all the way right before I think Almeida asked the question about love. So that's the next section. So let's start with Penny. Penny, go ahead.
Okay. And when he entered into the city, all people came to meet him, and they were crying out to him as with one voice. And the elders of the city stood forth and said, "Go not yet away from us. A new tide have you been in our twilight, and your youth has been given us dreams to dream. No stranger are you among us, nor a guest, but our son and our dearly beloved. Suffer not yet our eyes to hunger for your face. And the priest and priestesses said unto him, Let not the ways of the sea separate us now, and the years you have spent in our midst become a memory. You have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light upon our faces. Much have we loved you, but speechless was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. Yet now it cries aloud unto you, and will stand revealed before you. And ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation. And others came also and entreated him, but he answered them not. He stood only, bent his head, and those who stood near saw his tears falling upon his breast. And he and the people proceeded towards the great square before the temple. And there came out of the sanctuary a woman whose name was Almitra, and she was a seeress. And he looked upon her with exceeding tenderness, for it was she who had first sought and believed in him when he had been but a day in their city. And she hailed him, saying, Prophet of God, in quest of the uttermost, long have you searched the distances for your ship. And now your ship has come, and you must needs go. Deep is your longing for the land of your memories and the dwelling place of your greater desires. And our love would not bind you, nor our needs hold you. Yet this we ask ere you leave us, that you speak to us and give us your truth. And we will give it unto our children, and they unto their children, and it shall not perish. In your aloneness, you have watched with our days, and in your wakefulness, you have listened to the weeping and the laughter of our sleep. Now, therefore, disclose us to ourselves, and tell us all that has been shown you of that which is between birth and death. And he answered,
Are we stopping there, Shikant? Or
Oh, no, let's continue up until the time where she asked the question about love.
Apologies.
And he answered, People of Orphalese, of what can I speak save of that which is even now moving within your souls? Then said Almitra, Speak to us of love, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Let's go back, and it's going to be Evanique next. Anybody else who wants to read in the next round, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Go ahead and type a R in the chat. Go ahead, Evanique.
And when he entered into the city, all the people came to meet him, and they were crying out to him as with one voice. And the elders of the city stood forth and said, Go not yet away from us. A noontide have you been in our twilight, and your youth has given us dreams to dream. No stranger are you among us, nor a guest, but our son and our dearly beloved. Suffer not yet our eyes to hunger for your face. And the priests and the priestesses said unto him, Let not the waves of the sea separate us now, and the years you have spent in our midst become a memory. You have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light among our faces. Much have we loved you, but speechless was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. Yet now it cries aloud unto you, and would stand revealed before you. And ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation. And others came also and entreated him, but he answered them not. He only bent his head, and those who stood near saw his tears falling upon his breast. And he and the people proceeded towards the great square before the temple. And there came out of the sanctuary a woman whose name was Almitra, and she was a seeress. And he looked upon her with exceeding tenderness, for it was she who had first sought and believed in him, and when he had been but a day in their city. And she hailed him, saying, Prophet of God, in your quest of the uttermost long, have you searched the distance for your ship? And now your ship has come, and you must needs go. Deep is your longing for the land of your memories, and the dwelling place of your greater desires. And our love would not bind you, nor our needs hold you. Yet this we ask ere you leave us, that you speak to us and give us give us of your truth, and we will give it to unto our children, and they unto their children, and it shall not perish. In your aloneness you have watched with our days, and in your wakefulness you have listened to the weeping and laughter of our sleep. Now therefore disclose us to ourselves, and tell us all that has been shown to you, that which is between birth and death. And he answered, People of Orphalese, of what can I speak save that which is even now moving within your souls? Then said Almitra, Speak to us of love.
If you can't, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry
Sorry.
about that. Thank you. Please go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to speak about anything related to that. We're going to start with Connie. Connie, go ahead.
I was trying to get to the exact place again here, but I remember it well enough. The seeress, and I remember in John when Jesus told the disciples that he was leaving, but he wasn't. He was leaving the Holy Spirit. So I'm not really leaving you. I'm leaving you with great strength. I mean, I'm leaving the Holy Spirit. So it was basically him now telling them things that wisdom that they can then have. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let me see. So I like this, yet this we ask, ere you leave us, that you speak to us and give us of your truth. And we will give it unto our children, and they unto their children, and it shall not perish. In your aloneness, you have watched with our days, and in your wakefulness, you have listened to the weeping and the laughter of our sleep. Now, therefore, disclose us to ourselves, and tell us all that has been shown to you of that which is between birth and death. It's beautiful. Thank you, Connie. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, one line that actually, and I think what actually you just hit on is, perhaps the main theme of this particular section, but and ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation. I think that that's absolutely a powerful, powerful line. How many times that we actually don't know what we have until it's gone. And it's this moment that brings things into perspective. And so I can think of people, in situations that have been close to death and moving on, and that they've been in and they in that moment they realize what is the most important thing to them. You know, they really understand, and they talk. And I've spoken to people very close to their to when they were about to go, and they were still coherent, and then many times that they would actually talk about the most important things in their lives, and it would be their children. So I find that line to be, you know, really powerful. And many times in general, any kind of separation you could talk about, that you're saying goodbye to somebody for good. Like, and maybe, you know, you'll always be in contact, but you're separating in your lives. You know, you could think about maybe even things like somebody was telling me when they were parting from college, it really was like a moment that had come to them where they felt like, you know, that the bonds that they had were kind of, you know, going away, but that they had a deep appreciation for what they had over those years. And I think that takes time too. It takes wisdom. And I think that this is what, again, this is about. It's the journey that, and the wisdom and insights that have been gained at this time in his life.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Joe. I love the lines leading up to it, saying, "Much have we loved you, but speechless was our love. And with wails has it been wailed. Yet now it cries aloud unto you, and would stand revealed before you. And ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation." It's just beautiful. Go ahead.
Thank you for saying that, because it has remained speechless, but now in this moment of separation, we're going to connect, and you're going to give us things that actually last for generations. Thank you for reading those previous lines.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, it is, you know, the farewell discourse. So, you know, Jesus has done all of these things. These people have been with him, but they don't know him. And he has not revealed himself to them yet. He has been there. They have been there. They have loved him, and he has loved them. But there has been a veil. And that veil is dropped. And you're being direct, because you're saying, this is it. Whatever I think is valuable, let me do it now. And that is the power of these farewell discourses. Go ahead.
No, I think, and that's beautifully said, because when he's leaving, you know, the apostles are sad, but he's leaving them, and he's like, look, no, I'll be here, and I'm leaving you with the wisdom. I'm leaving with you with the way to live your life. And that is actually the same thing that's taking place here. I'm leaving you with the wisdom and everything that I've learned. And it's almost like, tell me, Lord, before you go, what do I need to know? And he's been telling the apostles the whole time, but that's a beautiful analogy.
Thank you, Joe. So what he gives them is the word, and what this prophet is giving them is the words. You see, that is the power of words, where all of his experience has been condensed into these words. And these are the words that he's speaking out to them. And then those words are going to become part of these people. They're going to become flesh, and they're going to live in them. That is what is going on. It's the same pattern. Thank you. Next, go ahead, Joe.
I mean, it's the idea of, and I think somebody brought up slice of macro comprehensive, and in the sense that the idea of love, tell us about love. What does it mean? And then he gives you the practical aspects of it. So it's both the abstract and the practical. It's beautiful, and it is communicated through the word back into, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Maritza, Evanique, and Penny. Maritza.
So the that line about ever it's been, you don't know what you don't know what you have until it's gone. It's, to me, it's also very much an admonition for us to perhaps be more aware of our interactions with others, in that it's, you don't want to have that regret when they're leaving you, because in that moment, you have no ability to fully express how you have loved them, because you only get the one chance to say you love them. Whereas if you had been aware of it previously, you might have had more time to say such. So that one, it's funny because you talked about, speak to us and give us of your truth. And then Joe said the other one that was an absolute favorite of mine. There's one more in the passage here that is really, really impactful to me. And it's where Almitra says to him, "Now therefore disclose us to ourselves." And every time I read that line, it really just gives me pause. And I know that it's only a piece of an entire sentence, but to me, it has the power of a sentence all on its own. The idea that we require those who have come before to point out to us aspects of who we are is really quite an astounding one to me. And I mean, it's beautiful and terrifying in the same breath, because it's this idea that our awareness cannot be as encompassing as the awareness of someone outside looking towards you, as opposed to from the inside. So I think it's a beautiful way of saying to us that we should value the perspectives of others without saying it so directly, which, it's this entire book. And actually, poetry in general is where it shines, is in doing that, and saying these things without saying them so harshly, as it were. But that line, it just gives me pause. The idea of disclose us to ourselves. And, it's also interesting in that she says that he is uniquely qualified to do that because he's stood apart, and in his aloneness, he watched with our days. And the imagery of saying that in your wakefulness, you have listened to the weeping and the laughter of our sleep. We as humans, well, actually, beings in general, are most vulnerable when sleeping. We're also fairly vulnerable emotionally when we're laughing, because it's so easy for someone to steal your joy when you're laughing. If they say an unkind word or phrase or look while you're laughing, because you're unguarded. It's very hard to be stiff and rigid when you're laughing. So that's when you're more vulnerable. So this idea that this prophet has seen you at your most vulnerable and has identified aspects of the you that you are when most vulnerable is kind of fascinating, especially, and like I said, for me, I view prophet as, my ancestor. So to me, this is saying to me that I need but look towards my ancestors for the answers to who are you when you are most vulnerable. And I mean, maybe that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but it does give you the idea that you cannot approach any type of completeness to the answer for that question without including those that came before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. I want to build up on one point. You know, this prophet has been with them for 12 years. And they have loved him, yet they have stood apart from him. There have been all these veils. They have been busy doing other things. And only when they realize that, okay, he's going now, they come and say, please talk to us, okay? Now, so the situation actually intensifies and it throws away all the chaff and all the habits, all the old habits. And then they are just focused on the core value that they seek and that he has. This is like the cross, you know, at the point where you're saying, okay, I'm going to give up the plow that I'm working on. I'm going to give up, you know, this kind of shyness I feel. I give up that I might appear stupid. I'm saying this is the only chance I have. And it allows them to actually listen and have a new life. See, the life that these people are going to have after this discourse is going to be so much more. And the beautiful thing and the sad thing is that they could have done this at any point of time. And so what it does, and again, the thing I love about Gospel of John is that they take that moment and they say, that moment is now available to you anytime you want. You can go back to the word. That is these are his words. Now, look at the kind of intense living that is possible if they actually live according to the words. And that is exactly, so it's taking this intense pain of separation and losing something that you value as life itself. And then in that process, you're getting something that lasts you and that shapes all of your life. So it's just, so that I just wanted to point that out. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is just amazing conversation. Next up is going to be Evanique, Penny, Dave, and Peggy. Evanique.
Yeah, the one line, well, not the one line, the few lines I wanted to point out is that when he says, and the priest and the priestesses said unto him, let not the waves of the sea separate us now, and the years you have spent in our midst become a memory. You have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light upon our faces. Much have we loved you, but speechless was our love, and with veils it has been veiled. And yet now it cries out unto you, and would stand revealed before you. And the way I read that is that when, especially the line where it says, much have we loved you, but speechless was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. I think they didn't know how to express the love for that spirit. When I looked at that passage, I was like, it feels like they didn't know how to express love or how to even verbalize it. You know, I know you were saying before that they were so busy with their lives, and I believe that's partially true. But I think you make time for what you want to make time for. And in a sense, they didn't make time for the spirit that was among them, because part of it is because they didn't want to. They said they were veiled. When they're talking about it and they're saying, um, but speeches was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. They put that veil over themselves, maybe because exposed to much truth, or maybe they just didn't know what to do with it. And I think that's true for a lot of people today, is that they don't know what to do with love. I mean, I think love is not something that is felt, but in a sense, if you've never been taught how to love or how to truly love or what that even means, then you have no idea how to express it. And as he's leaving, as the prophet is leaving, um, I think as the prophet is leaving, they're realizing like this is the time. I think it's and yet now it cries aloud unto you and would stand revealed before you. Is that they always assumed that it would always be there, like we do with other human beings. We don't accept that death comes for everybody, and that we always take for granted that we may have the next day and the next day, until that day that we don't. And I think this is a cry of, don't leave us now, because it like we're here. And Joe was talking about when he had experienced people who were about to transition, and the thing that they thought about was their kids. um and I just thought, yeah, because we say we don't have time for kids because we're trying to earn a living, and you love your kids, there's no doubt about that, but and you're trying to provide for them, but at the same time you sacrifice time with them. And it's funny that most people do say at the end of their life they think about their kids, they think about, but I've also heard people say when they're close that they wish they had said something to the people, like they wish they had said, not even so much I love you, that they had expressed how they feel about people, like friends, and how valuable they were to them. And it's not just saying, oh, I wish I said I love you, because we say I love you a lot. I think the expression of love is, let me say to you what you mean to me. And that's harder because you do risk being rejected. Like you said, you do risk being humiliated. You do risk being vulnerable. And like Maritza was saying, when you're laughing, that's when you're vulnerable, because people can steal your joy. But that's life, and you gotta laugh anyway, because that is your joy. And they could steal it for a minute, but if you let it close yourself off, like when I see this passage, and I keep going back to that same line where it says, I just lost it. And he said, I think I just switched. So where they talk about being veiled, and it says, but speechless was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. I think as people express love and they get hurt, they veil it. They put those covers on themselves. They build up that wall. And that's when you stop living and just start surviving, because sometimes the hurt is so deep that you don't think you'll come out of it, or you don't think that you'll recover. So some people make a choice to just not feel it again. But then it's always the biggest regret, I think, when you're at the end of your time, is that you didn't express it. And how that person takes it is on them. But for you, I think, and this is what you're seeing here, is that for you, the point is that you expressed it and that you continue to live even through the hurt and the pain. And I know we're going to go over it at some point, but the joy and sorrow connection is so important. So I'll just leave it there. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Evanik. Next up is going to be Penny, Dave, Peggy, and Nalini. Penny.
Okay. I just wanted to talk about one sentence basically in the same part that Evanique just read, which I found meaningful. And this, when we were talking about the metaphors last night and about the metaphor of the light. So this is, you have, and this is what the priest and priestess has said, you have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light upon our faces. So, you know, they realized that he was a spiritual being, that there was something special about this person that walked around, and the shadow and the light I thought was very interesting. So actually the shadow was dark, but the shadow passing was a light for them. And I just like that imagery very much, so that it seems kind of like, and then they go on to talk about the veils, but that they realized that there was something special, that this was drawing them into another dimension when they saw him, that they were happy. And then they went on to say kind of like, but they never told him that, but that they realized it in their human soul part, that, you know, they saw him and it was kind of like, oh, you know, kind of a contentment, kind of a feeling better about things just when they saw him walking around.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I think it's just I mean, that's what I find about this book, that his ability to express, you know, like your shadow, you know, it's like shadow being a positive thing, shadow of a bright light, causing that to you. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful metaphor, and so innovative. It's like, what happens is that you say, what, shadow? And then you say, that you've never really seen something that bright. And suddenly you realize that, okay, that's going to cast shadows, because suddenly everything is lit up in his presence. So it's going to, whenever there is any obstruction, you're going to see that. Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Dave, Peggy, and Nalini. Dave.
Yeah, just to go back to what Penny was saying about the shadow. You know how a shadow is, it just it's almost like a vibe. It's like a good feeling that you get off somebody. I think the idea of the shadow, you know, shadows have no kind of physical presence that you can really see. They just pass by. They're not like a physical thing. They're the light that's blocked by a physical thing. And I think in this case, the shadow is actually not a darkness of any sort. It's actually kind of like a spiritual vibe that people would get by being near him. I don't know if anyone, you know, you've looked at somebody, you just get this good feeling from them. It's almost an emanation of good feelings. And I think that's what he's getting at with his mentioning of a shadow, is this, it's an emanation that you get from being near him. Maritza, when she mentioned you're most vulnerable when you're laughing, I thought that was really interesting. I never, you know, I guess I must have missed that, because I didn't even see that in the passage, but Maritza talked about it, and I thought, yeah, it's just so true. You know, I never thought about it before. And I think part of the reason you're vulnerable is because when you're laughing, generally, if you're laughing with somebody, you're kind of connecting with them. You know, you say something funny, they think it's funny, so you've got that resonance, that connection with them. And then for them to suddenly, like, you're sort of putting out a connection to them, and they're instead blocking it and criticizing you, that's pretty painful. So I think you're trying to formulate a connection, and they're actually rejecting that connection. I think that's what laughter, when you laugh with people. So it's an interesting idea, this idea that you're more vulnerable when you laugh. I never would have thought of that. I never would have thought of that in any of my, any way. I never occurred to me. Two more points.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I? Like when people ask him, who are we? Can you imagine a friend of yours saying, well, so who am I? What am I? that, if somebody asks me that, like say a friend of mine that I've known for 30 years, how do I answer that? That's a tough answer. And in fact, he goes on to talk about other things like love and art and all the rest. Because somebody says to you, what am I? Who am I? You say, well, you're a nice guy. You got a few not so nice things. That's a hugely tough question. I don't think I want anyone to ask me who they are. I should try asking them. I'll have to try that sometime. One of my friends, I'll say, so who am I? And see what they say. But I guess I'll tend to be more positive than negative because nobody wants to offend anyone. Anyway, then my third point was, how hard it is to say you love somebody or you appreciate somebody. It's a tough one. I don't know whether it's a man thing because I find it very difficult, even with my most significant other. My wife's. I can do it. I've gotten used to doing it, but it's hard to do, and it's really hard to do with, say, my male friends. Hey John, I should tell you I love you. Oh, it's so hard. I don't know why, but it's very hard to do. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, David. I will address one of the points. The who am I is basically a question of what is a human. It is the most philosophical question that is being asked. So tell us, it's not about the individuality. And that's what he's proceeding to answer. He's telling you about nature of human beings. That is the question that they are asking, and that's the answer that he's giving. Next up is Peggy, followed by Nalini and Jade. Peggy.
Oh, thanks. I'm thinking about the light, and that maybe he prayed for them and he meditated for them, and he gave them peace and hope. And he dreamed the best things for their dreams. So I think he did have this, I don't know, aura about him. I mean, he must have had an aura about him that gave them hope. That's what I was thinking, how they knew him.
Thank you, Peggy. Appreciate that. Next up is going to be Nalini, followed by Jade. Nalini.
I don't think it's going to be anything new, but there were some things that Avanique said. I felt the same way, and there were things that Maritza said, which were very, very touching. I'm going to read just, these two lines and then go back to it. I also felt that even though, we stopped where, she's asking on people's behalf for the insights into the true nature of love or what love is. I think actually with the opening poem, when they talk about the coming of the ship, that's when they realize that, yes, we have been living together all this time, but now it's time to part. And they are all of a sudden faced with his departure. They suddenly also realize that they love him. And through all these years that they have loved him, they have been speechless and veiled. And now all of a sudden they understand they do love him very much, and they don't know. So it's their vulnerability. I think they're very vulnerable. And that's when I think that's what it is. So all along they have idea that they don't know, I guess, or until now they have not realized that he is leaving. They are going to be left there without him. And they love him so much that they actually ask this, which I thought was beautiful. In your aloneness, you have watched with our days, and in your wakefulness, you have listened to the weeping and the laughter of our sleep. Now, therefore, disclose us to ourselves and tell us all that has been shown you of what that which is between birth and death. And I thought that was so beautiful because he has really lived with them, seen them, gone through everything with them for 12 years. And they want him to, they want to know exactly what love is and how he feels. And then, of course, he goes on, later on, not we haven't read that as yet. But then this is when, of course, he goes and talks about the metaphors, comparing love to the winged entity, a gardener, a reaper, and a baker. But that's all I have to say. I think it was kind of very mixed emotions they had, and the vulnerability. I think all those things I saw in these first.
Thank you. Thank you, Nalini. I wanted to point out a couple of things here. One is his respect for the Tao. He's saying, look, what is it that I can confidently tell them? Okay, so he's very much aware of his own limitations. And when it comes, the final thing, when he's saying, that, okay, people are saying, give us this, tell us about ourselves, do this. His reaction is, and he answered, people of Orpheus, of what can I speak, save of that which is even now moving within your souls. This is the idea, when Naneshwar talks about this, the way he says is that, I'm a firefly and you have the light within you. So your Atma, there is God within you. And my words are nothing as compared to what is within you. And all I can do is to offer you as a firefly, I'm offering the light to the sun. That is what is going on with the words. So it is an invitation for people to look within, saying that the truth you have within you, if you open yourself and try to see it. So do not be overly impressed by these words, because these words are simply trying to point to something that is within you. And unless you can see it from within you, they are not of value to you. So it's just beautiful of his combination of humility, combination of that, plus saying that, oh, I have to tell them everything I know. Then combination of carefulness. Oh, I will tell them only what I confidently know. So it's just beautiful, his entire approach towards speech. Thank you, Nalini. Next up is Jade. Jade, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. With all the commentary about the joy and happiness kind of making you vulnerable, love making you vulnerable, one of the things that keeps coming to mind, slightly random, but I don't think so. If anybody has seen The Godfather, the ending of The Godfather, that is what's always struck me about that movie. That is the moment when he decides to enjoy himself and his guard is down. And bada bing, bada boom, it's done. But I feel as though it's very interesting, especially when you look at masculine archetypes. They are generally more serious. And they're the protectors and the providers. So I feel like there is something in there. When you have the responsibility of being the protector, you generally are not the one who has the right to have the fun, the joy, the expression. All of that stuff kind of gets pulled. And on some level, we do generally consider those things cardinal to love. But I'm also going to venture to say that it's funny that I come back as you guys are studying this, because I've actually been kind of studying the concept of love. And there is a concept of love where it's basically about interest, where my interest and your interests are intertwined, where I am you and you are me. So my best interests and your best interests are connected. So this is kind of also like the universal nature of how we're all connected and intertwined, because if you realize you harm one person, you end up harming another. I know this text isn't quite going there, but I haven't read the whole thing, but I do think there is something to it, with a lot of the things that people are saying, and the interconnection, and how the interactions that we have, whether we recognize it or not, are, for instance, they didn't put the time into the individual who is leaving. But if you're thinking about that other person's best interest and maybe spending time with them so they feel valued, or they're getting whatever it is that you have to give, if you're thinking of contributing to them, then by default, if you are actually loving as a verb and not just love as an emotion, you naturally give the expressions that I believe Evanique was talking about. I'm not sure, but I think those things kind of come into play. I don't want to say by default, but maybe more organically when we start to think about investing in each other's well-being. Even just, again, the concept of love being something, I don't know if it's commercialism that did it, of it being light and airy. There was a more austere portion aspect of love when the world was less safe. And I'm imagining this was written at a time also when the world wasn't quite as safe. And I know people could debate about that right now, considering the stuff that is happening in the world. But, it was the way we look at love now versus the way they were probably looking at love, due to what they needed, and have need as part of that, because you satisfy the need and you take care of the people that you love. That is worth considering at that point in time too.
Thank you. Thank you, Jade. So I want to talk a little bit about the context of this book. This book is it's a very different context than the modern context in several different ways. One is that this is written by somebody who is actually living between East and West. So he has many elements of the East and many elements of the West. So topics that are dealt in a kind of a more masculine way in the West, there is the yin part of it, which permeates this entire book. There is the focus on the Tao, the gentleness that is there throughout. So there is this mixture of East and the West in the Middle East. That is where it is coming from. That's one part of it. The second way in which it is different from the modern context is that Gibran is heavily influenced by actually the kinds of works that we are looking at, like the Gospel of John. So the love that is being talked about here is actually a much larger emotion than what is thought of in modern times. It's a much deeper emotion, and that's the background from which he talks about everything. And that's what makes it really, really amazing, because on one hand, it speaks to us at a physical level, And on the other hand, it speaks to us at a spiritual level, at a very deep spiritual level, in terms of like your love of the Tao, love of universal principles, love of God, whatever you want to call it. That is what is being talked about. The other part that Jade mentioned, which I want to comment on, is a verb. You know, this is all about a verb. There is just so much dynamism about it. It's quite incredible. So, folks, what I want to do now is I want to, the topic of love over here is a very large topic, and we will do it in a separate meetup. So we'll combine it with other topics like marriage and children, and we will do it that way. But I want to hear from you now, your experience of this book, because I am thinking of covering this entire book now in meetups, and we will do it in just this fashion of just leisurely going through everything, hearing all the comments, talking about them, and going forward, not trying to finish anything by any time, and just trying to commune with this book together and learning about it. I think doing so for Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and Gospel of John has done wonders for me and for many people here. And we're planning to use the same, I'm proposing to use the same thing. I'm not saying that this book is quite at that level, but it is at least in the ballpark, I think. And it has the advantage of being far more easier to grasp for a modern audience. So I'm very excited about doing this book in this way, but would like to hear everybody's comments on how we did this meetup, and what do they think about the prospect of going through this book, just like we did for the other books. I would project that it would take maybe about 10 meetups, something like that, somewhere between 5 to 10 meetups, depending on how we proceed, but would love to hear your thoughts. So we're going to start with Evanique, followed by Connie. Evanique.
I would love to do this as a series. I think this has been an amazing meetup. This is a totally new work for me. So I think the conversation was great. I think, yeah, I think we should definitely do this as a series. And yeah, amazing meetup.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, for example, the themes here are, you could see so much parallels between this and Gospel of John, because he is heavily influenced. You know, Bible is one of his large influences, but so is Sufism and Baha'ism and Nietzsche. So it's like, it's a very interesting combination. And he talks of the themes, the same themes that Gospel of John talks about, in a way which is modern, which is actually true to the themes, but is in a modern form. So it's really, really fascinating of that. So thank you. Next up is going to be Connie, followed by Joe. Connie.
I think it was perfection, and I look forward to going in just this exact format. Just loved it.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie. Next up is Joe. Joe, what did you think?
I thought it was excellent. And I think what it's really going to add is a lot of, it's going to add a lot of context and richness to the other texts that we're studying. I mean, specifically even some of the parallels that we drew this evening. I had actually pulled from the idea of rebirth some of the things that Gibran had talked about, that I talked about last night. You know, some of those, I think that it'll help us articulate those ideas in a much more eloquent way. So I think it adds to the depth. There's so many different parallels as well. in his, as we talked about the farewell discourse, and he's poetic about it. I mean, that's a distinction. Not to say that the Gospel of John isn't poetic in its own nature, but it's definitely, this is something of a. It's written it's written really well. I'll just say that.
Thank
So
you.
I like, and the format I think is great.
Excellent. Folks, if you have comments on just the book as a whole, the prospect of reading it, the format, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Would love to hear from as many people as possible. So the way I see this is that each great poet, he's clearly a great poet, not quite at the John level, but he's good. Okay, he's I mean, I love Gospel of John very much. But what each poet does is that he comes up with a set of metaphors, all his own, to talk about the same thing. And as I was saying yesterday, a different set of metaphors is like a different set of lights, trying to light up the elephant in the room. Okay, it's the same elephant, it's the same elephant. But because now you have a different set of lights, maybe different colored lights, with different kind of concentrations from different angles. And light is light. They're all metaphors throwing light. And the metaphors actually end up meshing together and increasing the acuity, the delicacy, sometimes the depth. You can see with certain metaphors deeper into what you're looking at. With certain metaphors, you notice different aspects of the same thing that you are looking at. And that's exactly what has happened when we have looked at Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and Bible in parallel. And what I'm hoping that by adding this, which is trying to do the same thing, because really the topic that is being studied here is the Tao. Tao is the best way of capturing it. This I learned from C.S. Lewis. There is a great book that he has called The Abolition of Man. It's a very short book, but just brilliant book. And he uses the word Tao for what Bhagavad Gita calls Brahma and what Gospel of John calls God the Father. He just uses the word Tao, and what Tao Te Ching calls Tao, because Tao Te Ching is just focused like a laser beam on the Tao. Okay, so that is the foundation that is common to all these four works. Now let's add the prophet to this list of three that we've been studying. So all of them are about the Tao, but they're about something that sits on the top of the Tao, which is how you grasp the Tao. And that is the word. Okay. Gospel of John is very, very advanced on the word. Tao Te Ching is at the lowest level of these four works, because it just tells you, look, be careful about these things. Okay. You're going to screw up, because you're going to use names, and then you're going to just get attached to the names, and you're going to just have 10,000 names with you. You're going to miss the Tao. So be careful about words. Gospel of John, Bhagavad Gita go much, 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 much further of saying, how do you use it? How do you, use them effectively? What kind of things you have to be careful about? And when you do it right, what can it do? And here you can see what all the prophet has are words. And in those words and through those words, he's imparting his knowledge of Tao to people that he cares about. And it's going to transform the life. And that is real. That is the power of a word. Words can do that and do that. And that is the foundation of civilization. So in that sense, Taoism has left the field open for Confucianism. Who came and gave the words? Who said, no, I'll give you the words and I'll build up this entire thing. And they had to partner with them. So that's why China, you have those dual bases, because the Taoists have been so careful about not building on words, because for civilization, you need to build on words. And you just have to make sure that the word is with God, that the word is with Tao. And there is this entire corpus of how do you make sure that your word remains with Tao, that your word is Taoistic, as Amon was putting it. I love the term Taoistic, because it is saying, look, you can't really, it's actually better, because it's better for several reasons. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit away, but it's core point. See, Tao is a noun. The title that Ursula Le Guin gives for the first verse 1 of Tao Te Ching is Taoing. Okay, it is a verb, which is better. Actually, Taoistic is even better than that, because it's a modifier. Okay, I would even I prefer Taoish, something like that. We're saying you're trying to make it kind of like the Tao, but you have to be careful that it is, as you're not even claiming that you have the Tao. You're actually doing the Taoing. You're not even saying you're Taoistic, saying, okay, am I really being Taoistic? You're kind of trying to be Taoist, Taoish. So you're trying to move towards that. And it's a continual process. It's not one-time thing. You're saying, is this Taoish? Is this Taoist? For you at every point of time. And that kind of thinking is being built into the thinking about words in Gospel of John, in Gita. Here it is being implemented. And so it's a tremendous addition. Thank you, Joe. Let's go to Penny, followed by Maritza next. Penny, what do you think?
Oh, I think it would be great to study it. I had read the Prophet when I was in college. It was very popular. I remember reading it, but not really getting very much out of it, I would say. But this time when I read it, I think because we have been studying the Gita and the Tao and John, it was much more meaningful. And, as I read all the chapters, I thought, we certainly can't talk about this whole book in one meeting, and there's so much in each of the chapters. So I think it would be great to study it in more depth.
No, I think that's great. I mean, and your observation that, actually all of these books are talking about the same thing, and some of them do it better than others. And as you get one piece, the other piece, actually, you understand it much better. And you keep going like that. The next thing is that I really like it when many of us are so deeply into it, because then what happens is that it's like a symphonic effect of different minds with different perspectives focusing on the same thing, which is incredibly deep. And we end up, I think, peeling more layers and seeing it a little bit better if there is this tremendous community behind, excited about the book. So thank you. Next up is going to be Maritza, followed by Nalini. Maritza.
So I really like this format. I think the richness that we get from all the commentary is just, it's unparalleled. There's no way reading it on our own, even reading it many times, you just can't tease out the same depth that you can from listening to other voices. It goes, it takes us back to that whole, the value of all the different perspectives, of all these works that we talk about. What they all have in common, is that they're they're like poetic prose that's using metaphor and symbolism. And I think that, this one aligns definitely with that, as some of the other works that we've been looking at with closer focus. And I would say, Shrikant, I will disagree with you just a little bit here in that I find the prophet to be far more lyrical. And to me, it hits the ear more closely as poetic than does the Gospel of John. I find the Gospel of John to be more direct, and it is prose, but it's like in narrative form, and it's a little bit less lyrical to the ear, to my thinking. Obviously, that's opinion, but what they both, or actually not both, all four of the ones we've been weaving interchangeably here into our discussion, all four of them are fantastic at providing us with an imagery, and we're looking at these philosophical and spiritual concepts, and we're invoking the spiritual, moral, nature, leadership, these concepts that we do walk with in our day-to-day. And all four of these texts invite us to explore them more intimately. And in addition to just inviting us to explore them, I really like that it seems that they all almost demand it. But who minds a demand when it's phrased in such beauty? So that's kind of a really, really cool thing. So I'm looking forward to more of this. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maritza. I do like the Gospel of John. Partly it is also the subject, kind of the range of things covered and things like that. And I've deliberately, for this second series where we are adding things, I have deliberately chosen works that are written in English. Now, what happens is that a lot of things are lost in translation. So one of the things I'm doing with the Gospel of John is that I'm going back to the Greek, original Greek in which it was written, and it is 10 times better than Gospel of John in English, at least, minimum, just each word. It's like once you get a word, what it can do is just so much. I did an entire meetup. Firstly, I want to put this. This is the meetup that we did on Gospel of John in 21 metaphors. So it's just focusing on metaphors and what metaphors can do, and going through the entire Gospel of John with these spotlights of 21 metaphors that allow you to see it. And what I find is that when you go back, like I'll give you just one example. When it says, he was in the beginning with God, the word with is actually the Greek word pros. Pros means a reciprocal connection. There is a back and forth that is going on. There is this energy that is flowing between them. It is the love between them. And all of that is captured in pros, in the word itself. Now with the word with doesn't, it loses about 90% of what it means, what was being said. And this happens again and again and again and again. So it's really fascinating. So I'm glad that we are reading Gibran here in English, where this work was written in English. I have a friend of a friend, and she was saying, what are you reading? You can't be reading English by Gibran. Do you know how beautiful he writes in Arabic? And I believe her, okay? Hopefully one of these days she will come and read some of Gibran in Arabic and talk about how it is different. And I believe it, because what happens is that each language also has this entire repertoire of metaphors and ways of expression, which is all its own. And many people who are really good at languages can make the full use of it. Okay, I have to say this one thing. I'm sorry, it's a little bit off topic, but there is a gentleman called Martin Buber, who had this really fundamental work called I, Thou. And Walter Kaufman, who translated it, had this comment on his language. He said that Martin Buber moved to Israel, started writing in Hebrew, but he couldn't quite master Hebrew enough so that he could write in the most convoluted way as he did in German, in Hebrew. So it was just too simple as compared to what he could do in German. But anyway, sorry about the digression. Let's go with Nalini, followed by Jade. Nalini, what did you think?
I thought it was amazing. And I have to share, and I hope
Please.
Connie doesn't mind it. We had a discussion last night, actually, both of us. And this is exactly what we were hoping for. And in fact, I said to Connie, I said, why don't we propose this, that we should really read the whole work and go through the entire work, just exactly the format that you chose today. So to me, this is just beautiful because, like Maritza said, and everybody else said, just listening to everyone, even if we are not saying anything, just those interpretations, those ideas, the way other person's viewpoint, I think that opens a whole new world to us. I do want to say something like Maritza. I think Kahlil Gibran is very poetic.
Yes.
It is just, I don't know, the words just melt and what you feel, but it is very different. It's on a different level. To me, it is. So these are three of those works, and they're all together very different to me. But I think it's very, very poetic. And a friend of mine who is from Israel, she read a few things of his in that, in the language, and it's just beautiful. The other thing I wanted to bring out, and I don't know if this is whether we have the time or not, but remember, I don't think anybody else knows about it, but Shrikant, the temples we have in India. It's amazing. These are the temples. There are the erotic sculptures there. And when you look at those engravings, there is everyday life depicted on that. It's the marriage, it's the birth, it's the the sexual relationship, it's living every day. Those are all on the temples. And that is basically what life is all about for a human being. And it's amazing to see that the temples will have all of it together at one place. Just like, in the works that we are reading. It's amazing to see. I just wanted to bring
Wonderful.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie. No, sorry. You mentioned.
Nalini.
Sorry, Nalini. I agree with both you and Connie. And this is the format that we use because our purpose is to commune with the text, and this is the best way to do that. Except that for the first time when I do meet up on something, what I'm trying to judge is that if there is enough interest amongst enough people, that it is worth going through it. So that's why we do a general meetup, so people can talk about it. And so, and I was confident enough after the first meetup itself, I thought it would take us 2 meetups to conclude whether to dive deep into it. But we're able to do that in a single meetup. So it's great. The last thing I would say is that what happens is that poetry is a very deep thing. Okay, what happens is that poetry actually speaks to your style of consciousness, the way in which you process things. And that is different for different people. So there is some poetry that is going to appeal to some people and some poetry that is appeal to other people. So there is difference of subjects. There are also difference of subjects, which is going to influence your poetic experience, aesthetic experience, the things that you like to focus on, and the range of things you like to focus on. So it's the subject of the matter and the way in which the mind of the poet works. Now, it is actually to my advantage, if other people like you and Maritza think that this is far more beautiful than I think, because you will be able to show me some of the beauty that I may be missing. Because just in your comments, you will say, oh, look at how he does this. Now it's possible and likely actually that my mind works differently. So that curve that your mind naturally follows is not the curve that my mind naturally follows. But by grace of words of people, of you making explicit what you see in the poetry, you will end up opening this particular work, the appreciation of this particular work, to many who don't. I think it's incredibly beautiful, okay? But I just think that Gospel of John is more beautiful. Okay, so that's, and so, but what I'm saying is that that's a variation about the topic and the style. And that is actually good to have diverse opinions on these things, because actually everybody gains a lot more. If we are looking at things where everybody thinks, oh, this is just great topic and this is beautiful, but some think it is this beautiful or that beautiful. And it's not just the quantity, it's also aspects. You know, our consciousness is very complex and it's very deep. There are some things that are being done which are different from other things. So it also opens up our being able to see something about the human mind, which we may not be as routinely aware of. So it expands our awareness. All of this goes back to the core observation of Owen Barfield, that great poetry causes felt transformation of consciousness. And that is exactly what we are doing. Wonderful comments. Thank you, Nalini. Next up is Jade.
I guess I just have a quick comment. I don't know if I have it in view,
Yes.
but this is kind of what brought me back to the group. Essentially, I was walking home tonight, and where I live, there are like lots of little, they look like birdhouses, but they're like book houses where people swap books. And the impulse said, stop. I stopped, and this is what I found. And so, yeah, so that's all I have to say. I'm back.
Wonderful.
So good to see you all.
Jade, it's wonderful to have you back. The only thing I would recommend is that we have done meetups on Bhagavad Gita. And the translation that I would highly recommend to you is the one by Sri Aurobindo. It is far, far deeper than this particular translation. I'm very familiar with this translation. You know, Bhagavad Gita is like, it's a perennial topic that we keep coming back to. So even if, you know, for example, that, you know, him becoming part of the ocean, that is actually, you know, it's a very large metaphor of you being a drop of water in the ocean. So you have the same nature as the Tao. you are divine in the same way. And when you, most of the times, unfortunately, we think of ourselves as salt. So we are focused on the differentiating part. But when you see that the universal principles run through us, and when you fall into the ocean, or you say, or let the ocean come into you, really, or you go into the ocean, that metaphor, we had a gentleman, Yogeshwar, who did the meetups with us in for Bhagavad Gita. And that's the metaphor that he kept coming back to many times. So Jade, thank you very much, and glad to have you here. All right, folks, this has been great start. So I will figure out the schedule, etc. And we are going to do this, and looking forward to it. So thank you, everybody. Really grateful for the comments, questions. It's just amazing. Thank you, folks. Good night.